This is Gaius Caesaris Commentarii de Bello Gallico Liber Primus, chapter 21. Caesar writes, Eodem die, ab exploratoribus certior factus, hostes sub monte concedisse, milia passuum ab ipsius Casris octo, qualis esset natura montis, et qualis in circuitu acensus, qui cognoscerent, misit. Great sentence. Eodem die. So eodem, it's idem, eadem, idem. So it's is ea id, and it's suffixed by dem, dem. So this means the same. Is ea id, that, this. And then with dem, the same. It is the is part, the ea, the id part. That's the part that actually declines. And it declines like is ea id. The dem part, that stays frozen. That does not do any declining. So eodem is going to be the ablative singular, masculine or neuter. Die, from dies ei, masculine. Fifth declension, die is ablative. Given that dies is a time word, this is an ablative of time when or time within which. I'm going to say time when. Caesar likes to start sentences with time, when something happened. So it sets up the setting. Eodem die, on the same day. Eo agrees with die, eodem die, on the same day. And which day is that? This is the same day as in the previous chapter, or actually the previous several chapters. Caesar has had a meeting with Dumnorix and Diviciacus. Diviciacus is the leader of the Aedui, who are Gallic Roman allies. And the Aedui, under Diviciacus, have promised grain for the Roman army. Well, for reasons that are, some excuses that are becoming more and more transparently lies, Caesar wants to know why the grain is being held back. Well, we haven't really, there is no grain, or it's in the mail. Check's in the mail. Just wait 2 weeks. In 2 weeks we'll have something for you. So Caesar, unimpressed by these excuses, summons all the Aedui nobility to him, asking where his grain is. They don't really want to say much of anything, but he finally gets it out of them that the grain is being held because there's a contingent of the Aedui who have befriended the Helvetians. And by holding the grain back from the Romans will suffer if they don't eat, they don't get their rations, and it will give the Aedui a chance to continue in their iter, their march to their destination. So the reason why Diviciacus and et al., the rest of the Aedui nobility, don't want to mention anything is because this conspiracy is being headed by Dumnorix, who is the brother of Diviciacus. And there is a contingent of the Aedui who support him. So Caesar has to tread very carefully. He summons Dumnorix in private and threatens him. Don't do this ever again. I have spies on you. If you do, I will kill you. Guess what happens? Anyway, on the same day. So on the same day as that, after Caesar threatens Dumnorix and then tells the Aedui, get me my grain, because an army marches on its stomach. Wars are won by food, lack of disease, ability to get fresh water. So eodem die, on the same day. Ab, preposition ab, meaning from, away from. It could also mean by, if we have a passive voice. Exploratoribus, an explorator, exploratoris masculine, is a scout. So reconnaissance. Put some guys on horseback, have them ride out ahead, check out the terrain, lay of the land where the enemy might be. And it's ablative. Could be dative, but it's going to be ablative because we have a preposition ab, which takes the ablative. It could be from the scouts or by the scouts, meaning something was done by the scouts, which would make the exploratoribus ablative of personal agent. Certior is the comparative of certus aum, certain. It's nominative, singular, masculine or feminine. And then factus, from facio, facere, feci, factus, to make, to do, as a perfect passive participle, which is what we have here. The fourth principal part, factus, nominative, singular, masculine, us. So as a participle, you translate it as having been verbed. So having been made. And when you have certior, it forms somewhat an idiomatic expression. If you certiorem facere, you make someone in the accusative certiorem more certain. That means you actively inform someone. Certiorem facere. In the passive, certior fio fieri factus sum, that is, to be informed, to be made more certain. Remember, the passive of facio is fio fieri factus sum, semi-deponent verb. And certiorem in the active version, certiorem facere, that's going to be a predicate accusative, because you make an accusative direct object, certiorem, a predicate, more certain. Certior fio fieri factus sum, that's going to be a predicate nominative. Certior would be a predicate nominative, and that's what we have here. So factus, participle, having been made more certain. You can translate as having been informed by whom? By scouts. Dudes he put on horseback, sent to ride up ahead, check things out. Eodem die, on the same day. So on the same day, having been informed by scouts. Informed by scouts, the subject is going to be Caesar. It's the same subject as the previous selection. Hostes, from hostis, hostis masculine, it's either going to be the nominative or accusative, plural. The enemy, plural, definite article, the enemy. Either going to be the subject if it's nominative or direct object if it's accusative. It would be weird if it's nominative because we've already have our subject being Caesar, so it's probably going to be accusative. Sub plus the accusative means up to the foot of, meaning motion or movement, and then sub plus the ablative means location, under, beneath, or at the foot of, and that's what we have here with mons montis masculine, mountain, hill, a mound of earth. And sub monte, so we are located at the foot of the mountain. We're not underneath the mountain. These are not the mines of Moria. They're not dwarves. We're just at the foot of the mountain. Meaning that we're probably not going to be attacked from above, right? Right? Maybe. Who knows? We're defended on the mountainside, right? Yes. Yeah, sure. We only have to worry about the part of our camp in front of us that doesn't have a mountain, right? Because no one's going to come from the mountain, right? Right? Anyway, concedice. The root is sedeo, sedere, sedi, sesus, meaning to sit. Concedice, to really sit down. Here it means to settle down or to encamp. Like they took a long sit to settle, to here encamp. Milia, milia, milium, always neuter, always plural. It's a noun meaning thousands. The singular is the indeclinable adjective mille, because we're dealing with more than 1,000 something. So 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, etc. Passoum, from passus us masculine, a pace, which is 2 steps. And it's genitive, plural, because it's partitive genitive working with milia, thousands of what? Of paces. Thousands of paces. You can't say metro card in Latin. You would have to say card of metro. You can't say doghouse in Latin. You have to say house of dog. Can't put 2 nouns together like you can in German. Metro card, doghouse. In Latin and in Latinate languages, like Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, you have to turn one of them into a genitive-y type thing. House of dog, card of metro. Thousands of paces. Thousands in Latin, plural, is a noun. So you can't put noun plus noun, passus. You have to make one of them a genitive. Thousands of paces. Aab, like up here, where here it was ablative of personal agent. Remember, it could be ablative of separation. We don't know yet. Keep our options open. It could be personal agent again. Ipsius. Now, take a good look at this. Ipse, ipsa, ipsum, ex self, meaning himself, herself, itself, themselves. It's the emphatic or intensive pronoun. Ipsius, this is genitive. Ipsios, it's one of them heteroclats where it declines differently. Its genitive will end in ius, like here, ipsios, like huios and ilios and unios. We have ipsios, and it refers back to Caesar, he himself, the very man. So it stands in, because it's a pronoun, for the noun Caesaris, the genitive of Caesar. Castris. Castris, this is going to be the dative or ablative plural neuter of castra, aurum, always neuter, always plural, camp. And then we have octo, indeclinable adjective. It's a numeral, 8. And it is going with milia. You might think, wow, that's really far away. Yeah, but it does a nice framing of all the stuff that goes with it. So we are 8 miles, 8,000 of paces, ab, from, ablative separation, from the camp, castris is ablative separation, ipsios, genitive, of himself, genitive singular masculine, ipsios, stands in for Caesaris, of Caesar. So he found out, he was informed that, remember that certiorem facere, or the passive, certior fio fieri factus sum, can take an indirect statement, oratio obliqua. What was he informed of? What was the long noun clause that he was informed of? That the enemy, the accusative, subject, indirect statement, the enemy, concedisse, that explains the perfect active infinitive of concedeo, concedere, or concedere, concedi, concessus. So that they had encamped. And notice the perfect infinitive shows a prior action to when Caesar was informed, because the Helvetians already set up their camp, and then the scouts came and they informed Caesar and said, so the enemy, they have encamped, already done so, perfect tense infinitive, at the foot of the mountain. And Caesar said, how far? And they said, milia octo, in the accusative, because this is accusative of extent of space. Shows how far away, what distance. What distance does the action of the verb extend? What distance are they encamped? They are milia octo, 8,000 of paces separation from the camp of himself, from your camp, sir. On the same day, having been informed by scouts that the enemy had encamped at the foot of the mountain, 8 miles from his own camp, qualis esset natura montis, et qualis incercitu accensus qui cognoscerent misit. So notice we have misit at the end, so we kind of cheated here. Third person singular perfect active indicative. Subject is still Caesar, like it was here with the participle factus. Remember, this is our main verb misit. Everything hinges upon this misit. So this action here, this factus, this perfect passive participle, it happened prior to when Caesar sent. So first he was informed about this thing, then he sent. And qualis, let's jump back here the way we should. Qualis has to do with quality as opposed to quantus, which has to do with quantity. So qualis means of a sort. What sort? What kind? What's the quality? Esset. Esset is the third person singular imperfect active indicative, subjunctive. Ooh, subjunctive of sum esse fui futurus. So imperfect subjunctive. Why is it subjunctive? Well, qualis is an interrogative. It can be an interrogative, doesn't have to be, but it can be. Of what sort? What's the kind? What quality? Esset? Well, we did kind of cheat and look ahead at misit, so we know that the main verb misit, perfect tense, we're in secondary sequence. So if we have any subjunctive clauses, any dependent subjunctive clauses inside this sentence, they should be imperfect subjunctive for contemporaneous / subsequent actions, or pluperfect subjunctive for prior actions. So this is something that is either contemporaneous, happening at the same time as when Caesar sent these guys, or subsequent. Of what sort was at the same time Caesar sent them? He sent them what sort was natura. Of what sort was the natura? This is going to be a nominative, singular, feminine, subject or predicate nominative. Of what sort? Well, what is the sort? Or, yeah, it's the natura, the nature. Montis, Mons Montis, the hill. We're referring back to the Mons Montis under which the Helvetians have encamped. So they have encamped Natura Montis Sub Monte, at the foot of the mountain. Natura Montis, the nature of the mountain. What is the nature of the mountain? What is the terrain of the mountain? Is it a big mountain? So it's a jagged? Is it got an easy slope, difficult slope? Et and qualis, another qualis. In plus the accusative shows motion towards, into or onto. In plus the ablative shows location, in or on. In kerkitu, that is the ablative singular masculine of kerkitu, kerkitus, masculine, meaning circuit, as in going around in a circle. You can see kerkitu, kirk, circle, like kirkum. So in its, we're going around it in a circle. Acensus. Acensus, us, masculine, means the ascent. Like the verb is ascendo, ascendere, ascendi, ascensus. So the ascent, the climb, the incline, the going up. It goes with qualis, as natura went with the first qualis, asset. This, acensus, goes with this qualis, with an implied asset as well. Of what sort was the nature of the mountain? What was the nature of the mountain? What was the mountain like? And of what sort was the acensus, the ascent, the climb, in kerkitu, in its circuit, in its circumference? Probably best to use circumference here. As you went kerkum, around it. What was the climb like as you went around it? Qui cognoscerent, then we have qui quae quod, who what, or who which. Cognoscerent, cognosco, cognoscere, cognovi, cognitus, to learn, to find out. Third person plural, imperfect, active subjunctive. This qui here could stand in for ut. This is a relative purpose clause, the adjectival purpose clause. It's who were sent. They were those who were to find out. He sent them who were to find out. He sent them to find out. So he sent the scouts, this is implied exploratores here, who were to find out. And what is it that they were supposed to find out? Qualis asset natura montis, et qualis in kerkitu acensus. This is what they were supposed to find out. These noun clauses, introduced by an interrogative. That equals indirect question. Qualis asset natura montis, et qualis in kerkitu acensus. Those are indirect questions. You can see the direct question there. Caesar went up to these scouts and he said, qualis est natura montis, et qualis est, if you want to put it again, in kerkitu acensus. He wanted to know what is the nature of the mountain and what is the ascent in its circumference as you go around it. And what's the climb like as you go around it, you could say. And then he sent them, misit, qui, so that they might find out, in order that they might learn, figure out, qualis esse, what was the nature of the mountain and what was the climb like as you went around it? What was the climb like in its circumference? Renuntiatum est, facilem esse. So renuntio, renuntiare, renuntiavi, renuntiatus, not just to nuntio, to message, but to message back, like report back. It is the third person singular, perfect with est, passive indicative, and the subject is an it. You can see the used for the neuter. It was reported back that, takes the indirect statement, facilem esse, very short indirect statement. Facilem esse, we have the whatever we were talking about. It was easy. Probably the acensus, because it's accusative and it's singular and it's masculine or feminine. The M. It's not facile, neuter. And then esse, we just need an infinitive. We have the present infinitive because it's contemporaneous with the reporting back. It was reported back that it is easy, like the climb is easy, the acensus. Not a difficult climb. We should be able to make it easily. It is easy. De tertia vigilia, ti labienum, legatum pro praetore, cum duabus legionibus et iis ducibus, qui iter cognoverant, summum jugum montis ascendere jubet. So de, meaning down from, or about, or concerning. With numerals, numbers, ordinals, and cardinals, it usually means around. Around the tertia vigilia, tertius third, and this ordinal goes with vigilia. Now, you would expect to find macra over the final a of tertia and vigilia. I did not put them. Haha. Around the ablative of time when, the third hour. I'm sorry, not the hour, but the third watch. Remember, the Roman night, nox, is divided into quatuor vigiliae, the 4 watches, each approximately roughly going to be about 3 hours long, but remember that it'll fluctuate depending on what time of year, because it's divided into 4 based no matter how many hours of night there are, which fluctuate based on the season. So around the third watch, that's going to be somewhere between midnight and 3 a.m. T stands for Titus. Titum labienum, going to be the accusative. You get that from labienum. Going to be accusative of T-lab, Titus Labienus, who is Caesar's legatum pro praetore. Here's his rank. He's a legatum, which here in the sense of the military is a lieutenant. So he's like Caesar's second in command. And his pro praetore, acting in the stead of a praetor, acting as a praetor. You could say lieutenant and chief of staff. One translation I have says for pro praetore, chief of staff. You could just say he's a lieutenant acting with a praetorship, acting as a praetor, which means that he is given by Caesar the ability to wield imperium, because a praetor has imperium. That means that he can command an army. So T-Lab, he's acting as in Caesar's stead. He can field an army. He can lead the troops. Cum duabus legionibus, cum plus the ablative, accompaniment, duabus legionibus, ablative, plural feminine, with 2 legio legionis, feminine legions. Remember, legio is feminine. So with 2 legions at eis, from isea id, and goes with ducibus, from dux, ducus, masculine, leader, but here means guides. With those guides, wait, which guides? Picked up by qui. So is, not always, but is often picked up by a qui. Ea would be picked up by a quai, and id would be picked up by a quod, in order to better explain what the is, ea, id pronoun thingy is. It means this or that. Is, ea, id means this or that, but like, what is this or that? It is this thing, which, qui quod, is and then an explanation of what it is. And with those guides, which guides? Qui, who, iter cognoverant, who had learned or who had figured out the iter, the root, and then T-Lab, supposed to his Caesar's lieutenant and chief of staff, with 2 legions and those guides who had learned of the root, a summum jugumontis ascendere jubit. So summum from summus meaning the top of, the height of, the summit. Remember that it has the of as part of its translation. It does not take the genitive. Of is contained within its translation. It's an adjective that agrees with a noun like jugum. So we're going to this is the accusative direct object. The jugum, the top, that's the jugum, the peak. The top ridge of the mountain, the crest of the summit, and then mons montes, of the mountain. So the top crest of the mountain, the top ridge of the mount. Ascendere, so this is the direct object, the top ridge, and the genitive of the mountain. Direct object of this verb ascendere, which is the objective infinitive of jubet. So the subject is still Caesar, third person singular. He's the subject of misit. And then we have jubet. He, Caesar, orders a subject accusative titum labienum, T-Lab, and then legatum is in a positive agreeing with T-Lab, his lieutenant, chief of staff, to what he ordered him to do. Eubeo famously takes a subject accusative and an objective infinitive like ascendere, to ascend, to climb up the top ridge of the mountain, the same one at the foot of which the Helvetians have encamped, with 2 legions and those guides who had learned the route, who had figured out the route. Nice. So those are Caesar's orders to T-Lab. And he orders him to do this around the 3rd watch. So a little bit after midnight, or around there, in the hours after midnight before we get into the pre-dawn hours. So the dead of night. T-Lab, go ascend the top ridge of the mountain with 2 legions and those guides who had learned of the route, so they can guide you. Quid sui consilii sit ostendit. Quid, quis quid, quid is what? Sui, so quid, not always, but it often will take a genitive here, a partitive genitive to mean of something, what of something, where in English would just say what blank. So what, Latin says, what of his counsel, English will just say what counsel, what plan, what kind of a plan, what sort of a plan, what of a plan was his. And then we have sit, the 3rd person singular present active subjunctive of sum esse fui futurus. And then we have ostendit. So he ostendit. Notice that we changed tenses. Nisit is perfect and jubet is present. It's a historical present. It stands in for jusit, the perfect tense, but it is technically present tense. And ostendit is technically present tense because in this dependent subjunctive clause, which is of course easily identified as very good, an indirect question, we have sit, the present tense, which is a contemporaneous or subsequent action with, it's going to be this present tense, because you don't see the present subjunctive in secondary sequence, you see it in primary sequence. And so this historical present is acting like primary sequence. He ostendit, it means to show, like the English word ostentatious, but I more like it to mean explain here. So he explains, like he orders T-Lab to do this thing, to ascend the top crest of the mountain. He explains, presumably to imply dated T-Lab, Tito Labieno, and he explains to him what sort of a plan there is, what his plan was, what his plan is. And he explains what his plan is. This is an indirect question. You can see the direct question, quid sui consilii est? What is his plan? What sort of plan does he have? Ostended, he shows, he points out, he explains what his plan is, what sort of plan there is, what sort of plan he has. I mean, you can kind of imply. T-Lab with 2 legions goes to the top of the hill, the summit, while the Helvetians slumber below. Well, what happens if the legions, they have the high ground, Anakin. They just come down from the high ground. Right as the sun creeps over the horizon, right at dawn, as they're getting up, stretching, getting ready to fix some breakfast. Oh my goodness, the Romans have the high grounds. They've got us. Are you surprised? I was surprised. Oh my goodness. What a plan. What a dirty, sneaky trick. Ipse, nominative singular masculine, referring to Caesar. So ipse, de quarta vigilia, eodem itinere, quo hostes ierant, ad eos contendit, equitatumque omnem ante se mittit. So, whereas around the 3rd watch, T-Lab, he orders T-Lab to do this thing, he himself, de quarta vigilia, around the quarta, the 4th watch, so ablative of time when, he himself, eodem itinere, by the same, idem eodem idem, like up here with eodem die, by the same iter itineris neuter, same root, by the same root, the exact same one, quo, by which, qui quae quod, ablative singular, neuter, the antecedent is itinere, by which the hostes, the enemy, ierant, they, eo, ire, e, or iwi, itos, they, 3rd person plural, pluperfect, active indicative, had gone. They had already gone. So Caesar is going to go by the same route, by means of the same route, by means of which the enemy had gone, the same route which the enemy had taken. Ad eos contendit, and he hastens to them, equitatumque, and his equitatus us masculine, his cavalry omnis, omne, all, every single last one, all of his cavalry, all of his horse, which means his contingent, his squadron of horse people, knights. You can see equus in there, and all his horse, ante se mittit. Ante takes the accusative, before. Se, circle se, it's the reflexive. Draw an arrow to the subject. Mittit, you could also draw an arrow to ipse, Caesar. So mittit, he sends, 3rd person singular, present active indicative of mitta, mittere, misi, misus. He sends the direct object, equitatum omnem, and he sends all of his horse ante se, before him. So he puts his cavalry before him. Usually the cavalry rides on the flanks, the side, but he puts the cavalry in front, ante se, before him. He sends them forth. And contendit. He hastens to them, meaning to the enemy. So he himself, around the 4th watch, hastens to them, meaning to the enemy, and to T-Lab, who has the high ground, sneakily waiting above them. And Caesar will go eodem itinere, by the same route by which the enemy had gone. And he sends his cavalry, all of them before them. Quick, do a quick charge. Publius Considius, qui rei militaris peritissimus habebatur, et in exercitu lucisullae et postea in marci crassi fuerat, cum exploratoribus praemittitur. So Publius Considius, this is the nominative singular masculine, so we have finally changed subjects from Caesar to this dude, Publius Considius. Who is Publius Considius? Well, qui rei militaris, who, all right, we're going to get some more info about this guy. We have a relative pronoun introducing a relative clause, which is an adjectival clause. Adjectival clauses being descriptive clauses. They're adjectives. We're going to describe this Publius Considius fellow, who rei militaris. Res militaris means literally military stuff. Military matters, have stuff having to do with soldiers. It best translates into English as stratagem, as strategery, as your ability to strategize on the battlefield as a soldier. Military matters. Peritissimus. Peritosaon, meaning skilled or experienced, takes a genitive in what you're skilled or experienced in. You are experienced of something with this adjective. Peritissimus is the superlative, issimusaon. Agrees with qui, which also goes with Publius Considius. So this guy was peritissimus, most skilled or very experienced in genitive re militaris, most skilled in military strategy. In strategy, in the way the army works, military stuff, soldier stuff. Knew his way around a campaign. Habebatur, habeo, habere, habui, habitus, to have, to hold, can also mean to consider. You have something, you hold something in a certain way, that means you consider it to be a certain way. Especially if you hold something in your mind to be a certain way, you consider it to be that way. You have an image of something or a way that you perceive it. So habebatur here, this is the third person singular imperfect passive indicative. Habebatur. The subject is qui. Once again, Publius Considius. He was being held, literally, as he was being held, very skilled of military strategy. Better English would say something like, he was considered. He was being considered peritissimus, and that's a predicate nominative. If qui is the subject of this relative clause, peritissimus is the predicate nominative. He was being considered. He was held in such a way that he was this thing, peritissimus, which is why it's nominative. He was considered very experienced in military strategy. Et, and in plus the accusative would be motion towards, into, or onto, but in plus the ablative is location. In the exercitus us masculine, the army. And then we have L, the abbreviation for Lucius, Luci Sulla. So this is Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Yes, that one. The infamous dictator, the one who broke the game. So Lucius Sulla. Et postea in, M stands for Marcus. This is Marci, the genitive to go with Crassi, Crassus, Marcus Crassus. This is Marcus Crassus, the triumvir, Caesar's evil colleague. Fuerat, third person singular, pluperfect active indicative of sum esse fui futurus. He had been. Who had been? Publius Considius. He had been both et, and its correlative et, both in the army of Lucius Sulla, genitive, Lucius Sulla possessed that army, in the army of Lucius Sulla, and afterwards, after Sulla, in the army implied exercitu of Marcus Crassus, the triumvir. And then he was in the army of Julius Caesar, the other triumvir. What a distinguished career. Just going from one illegal dictator to another triumvir to another illegal dictator. It's amazing. What a great guy. Cum exploratoribus praemititur. Cum takes the ablative, meaning with, if it's a preposition. Could be conjunction. Oh, it's a preposition. With the exploratoribus. Hey, we start out with some scouts in the beginning, and we're going to end this chapter with some scouts. Explorator, exploratoris, masculine. With the scouts, praemititur, third person singular, present passive indicative, praemita, praemittere, praemisi, praemissus, meaning to send beforehand, to send forth beforehand, to send forth ahead of time. So it is sent forth. Publius Considius is sent forth. He's up here. The main sentence is Publius Considius cum exploratoribus praemititur. Publius Considius is sent forth with scouts. Well, then you'd be left wondering, well, who's this guy who just sort of came on stage left? This guy who was considered very experienced in military strategy and had been, at one point in time, in the army of Lucius Sulla, winner, and afterwards in the army of Marcus Crassus, second winner. Now he's in the army of Julius Caesar in Gaul, third winner, 3 strikes you're out. And he is sent forth with scouts. Optime, very well done. Valete omnes.